You're being selfish, Ava. Your brother was drowning, and you were sitting on all that money. That's what my mother said as she handed me an empty bank statement, the account I'd been building for 6 years. Every cent gone. Just like that. She said it like I was the villain. Like the years I spent working late-night shifts and living below my means were just an inconvenience waiting to be repurposed for someone more important. Hi, I'm Ava Patel. I'm 22 years old, and last Tuesday, my entire life plan got shattered with one family emergency. I came home from a weekend at a regional robotics competition where my team won first place, and I got offered a scholarship interview with one of the most competitive engineering schools in the country. I was flying. Everything was finally aligning until I opened my banking app and saw zeros. All zeros. $42,738.26 drained. My entire self-funded education savings. Gone without a trace. At first, I thought it was fraud. I called the bank in a panic, convinced my identity had been stolen. I even froze my accounts, reset every password, filed a fraud claim. But it wasn't fraud. It was family. My mother and stepfather had emptied the account using power of attorney privileges they'd retained from when I was a minor. Legally, they weren't supposed to have access anymore. But they did. And they used it to pay off my older brother's gambling debt. Let me back up. Growing up, I wasn't the loud kid. I wasn't the star athlete or the golden child with the charismatic smile. That was Jordan, 4 years older, naturally magnetic, and perpetually irresponsible. Every time he crashed a car, maxed out a credit card, or got suspended, there was always an excuse. He was finding himself. He just needed support. I was the support, the quiet achiever, the one who kept her head down and brought home straight A's, who said no to parties and yes to scholarships. While Jordan flamed out of 3 colleges, I took AP classes online to graduate a year early. While he got bailed out of bar fights, I was coding simulations in my bedroom after my restaurant shifts. My parents called it balance. They said every family had a dreamer and a doer. I was the doer. So, I started saving early. At 16, I opened my own account, technically joint with my mom, since I was underage, but it was supposed to become mine alone at 18. Birthday money, tutoring income, restaurant tips, all went into that fund. I didn't touch it, not even when my laptop broke sophomore year. I borrowed a friend's until I could afford a refurbished one on Craigslist. Because I was building something bigger. I wanted out. Out of the small town. Out of the toxic family dynamic. Out of the role I'd been silently assigned my whole life. And I almost made it. Until Jordan messed up again. Apparently, he'd racked up nearly $40,000 in sports betting debt. He'd been borrowing from shady loan apps, maybe worse. It all came crashing down the same weekend I was gone, calls from collectors, threats of legal action. My parents panicked. They looked at my savings, at everything I'd built, and made a decision. "We didn't think you'd miss it right away," my stepfather had the nerve to say. "And we planned to pay it back eventually." Eventually? With what? Hope and good intentions? When I asked what they expected me to do about my tuition deposit due in 2 weeks, my mom just sighed. "You're so smart, Ava. You'll figure it out." I stood there, shaking, as my brother came downstairs with his stupid smirk, holding a sandwich he probably didn't pay for. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sorry, sis. I didn't think they'd actually use your money. But hey, thanks." He walked away before I could respond. Because he didn't care. And neither did they. That money wasn't just tuition. It was my escape plan. It was proof that I could build something on my own without handouts or shortcuts or damage control. And now it was gone. When I demanded to know why they didn't even call me to ask, my mother said, "You were at some nerd competition, Ava. Your brother was in danger. We had to act fast." Danger. That word echoed in my ears for hours afterward. Apparently, his danger mattered more than my dreams. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the tiny converted garage room I'd lived in since I was 13, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my chest was collapsing in on itself. Not just because of what they'd done, but because of what it meant. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource. And I finally saw it clearly. The extra shifts, the tutoring, The fact that I cooked dinner 3 nights a week while my brother slept until noon and partied every weekend. The way my accomplishments were brushed aside while Jordan's mistakes were met with second chances. 100 little cuts I had ignored until the bleeding was too much to hide. And now they had taken everything. Everything but one thing. My mind. I still had the skills I'd built. The knowledge. The fight. And something else. Rage. Not loud, dramatic rage. Not punching the wall rage. But focused rage. The kind that rebuilds. That night, I wrote 2 emails. One to my scholarship program, explaining a sudden change in financial circumstance and requesting a meeting. And another to my old robotics mentor, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year but who once told me, "If you ever need a way out, you call me." I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. This wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't going to let them win. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The house was quiet the next morning, but not peaceful. It was that heavy kind of silence that comes after a storm, after something breaks and no one wants to admit it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same cup of coffee I'd been nursing for 30 minutes. The sun filtered through the blinds in streaks, hitting the unpaid bills my mother always left under the fruit bowl. I noticed the credit card statement on top, and I almost laughed when I saw the balance. Over $12,000. And not a single charge was mine. I'd spent most of the night drafting those 2 emails. One to my scholarship coordinator, the other to Dr. Lin, my robotics mentor from high school. The scholarship committee had already replied. They were sympathetic to my situation, but unfortunately, since I hadn't officially secured the grant yet, there was no emergency funding they could offer. I was encouraged to apply for a deferment and revisit my enrollment next year. Next year? Like I hadn't built my entire life around starting this fall. The second email, though, the one to Dr. Lin, had yielded something else. She hadn't written back formally. Instead, at 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a simple text. "Meet me at the old lab. 11 a.m. Come alone." I checked the time. 9:07 a.m. I stood, dumped my cold coffee, and went to get dressed. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't know them that. The lab was where I'd first learned how to breathe again after years of invisibility at home. It was in the basement of a science wing at my old high school, a concrete cave that smelled like soldering fumes and energy drinks. Dr. Lin ran it like a command center. She didn't care who your parents were or how you dressed. If you showed up ready to build something, she handed you a soldering iron and made you useful. I found her exactly where I expected, standing at a cluttered bench, half hidden behind a stack of drone schematics. She didn't look up when I entered. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," she said, flipping a page. I stepped inside slowly. I didn't know if I should. "You should have called me the day you turned 18 and still didn't have your own account access." I flinched. She finally looked at me. Her expression was unreadable, but not unkind. "Sit," she said, motioning to the cracked swivel stool next to her. I sat. For a moment, we said nothing. Then I told her everything. Not just about the drained account or the scholarship slipping through my fingers, but about the years before that. About Jordan's disasters, my parents' excuses, the way I'd learned to make myself smaller and quieter and more useful just to survive. Dr. Lin didn't interrupt once. She listened like she always had, with total presence. When I finally finished, she leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "You already know what you need to do, don't you?" I nodded slowly. "I need to get out." "Not just out," she said. "Free." She reached behind her and pulled out a folder, thick with printed listings. Job postings. Apprenticeship programs. Technical contractor gigs. "I keep this ready for students like you. The ones who are too good to be stuck in someone else's story." I blinked at her. "You think I'm good? Kid, you rebuilt a malfunctioning prototype in the middle of a state competition with nothing but an Allen wrench and chewing gum. You're not just good. You're dangerous when someone gets in your way." My throat tightened. She handed me the folder. "I've already made a few calls. There's a short-term robotics internship opening up at Lumitech downtown. It's not glamorous and it doesn't pay much, but they'll sponsor your housing if you commit for 3 months. No degree required. Just skill. Do I qualify? I asked, stunned. I wouldn't be wasting my breath if you didn't. I stared at the folder in my hands. Lumitech was no joke. They were a rising star in the applied robotics space, with government contracts and R&D partnerships across the state. Just being in their orbit would open more doors than any apology from my family ever could. I swallowed hard. When does it start? 2 weeks. Can you be ready by then? I hesitated only for a second. Yes. Then stop looking like the world just ended. It didn't. You just outgrew the box they tried to keep you in. I left the lab with shaking hands and a new kind of adrenaline in my bloodstream.
This wasn't just a backup plan.
This was my out. But there was still the matter of confronting the people who put me in this position in the first place. When I got home, the air felt thicker somehow. My mother was on the phone, pacing with her usual forced calm voice, the one she used with bill collectors and teachers. My stepdad was hunched over the kitchen table, scratching off lottery tickets like they owed him something.
And Jordan?
He was nowhere to be found. I walked straight to my room, locked the door, and opened the blank document on my laptop. Subject: Notice of intent to separate financially. The letter poured out of me like a dam breaking. I wrote in clear, clinical language that I was formally requesting to remove any remaining joint accounts or legal authorizations tied to my name. That I was in the process of contacting a lawyer. That all future communications regarding my finances were to go through me, and only me. I printed 2 copies. One for my mother. One for myself. I placed hers on her nightstand. No signature. No apology. Just the truth. Later that night, my brother texted me. Mom says you're making a scene. What's your problem? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a single response. My problem is that I stopped pretending this was normal. And I blocked his number. Because I don't owe them my silence anymore. I heard the knock on my door before sunrise. 3 soft raps. Hesitant. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the ceiling in the dim morning light, my phone clutched in one hand, heart still pounding from the adrenaline of last night's letter drop. My message had been clear. I was severing financial ties. I was done being their fallback fund, their backup plan, their scapegoat. And I meant it. But I knew the knock would come. Mom called my name once. Not with rage. With something worse, wounded sweetness. Ava, honey, we need to talk. I stayed silent. She waited a moment longer, then sighed. I heard the creak of the hallway floor as she walked away. A few minutes later, the front door opened and shut. Off to work. She hadn't worked a full-time job in years, but suddenly, she was a martyr again. I could practically hear her telling her friends at the salon, Ava's been so distant lately. She's always been difficult, but this is something else. I got up slowly, slipped into jeans and a sweatshirt, and opened the window. Fresh air. A simple thing. But that morning it felt like the first breath of a life I hadn't lived yet. My phone buzzed. It was Dr. Lin. Lumitech accepted your application. Pack light. You report August 7th, 8:30 a.m. Orientation details coming soon. I'll send over the housing contact. Congratulations, Ava. You earned this. I froze, rereading it 3 times before it sank in. It was real. I was in. The internship I didn't dare to dream about before was happening.
Just like that.
In 2 weeks, I'd be living in a studio apartment 3 cities away, working in a lab full of people who spoke my language, the language of circuitry and design, and actual possibility. But I had 14 days left in this house. 14 days of walking on eggshells. Of holding my breath. Unless, I glanced at the calendar taped above my desk. If I pushed, I could move out this weekend. I still had my side hustle money, $2, $300 spread across 2 accounts. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to bridge me to my first Lumitech stipend. I could leave.
Now.
And so I decided I would. I spent the rest of the day quietly packing, loading boxes into my trunk while my stepdad napped in the recliner and Mom pretended not to notice. The garage-turned-bedroom had always been more storage unit than sanctuary, barely insulated, always too hot or too cold. But it was mine. Or at least, it had felt like mine until they emptied my savings without a word. I peeled posters off the wall, folded the robotics hoodie I'd won at regionals, pulled up the loose floorboard where I'd hidden my backup flash drives and birth certificate. Everything went into 3 neat boxes labeled keep, sell, start over. Around 7 p.m., the yelling started. You gave her what? My stepfather's voice boomed from the kitchen. You're telling me she left you some kind of legal document? Are you kidding me? I didn't think she was serious. Mom hissed back. She was just upset. I thought we'd talk it out. Talk it out, he barked. Our son nearly lost his life. To a poker app, I muttered from behind the door. I slipped on my shoes, grabbed the last box, and headed toward the back. I wasn't going to wait for round 2. But then I made the mistake of stepping into the hallway. Mom was waiting. She didn't look angry, she looked hurt. Which, somehow, was worse. You're really leaving, she said, her voice soft but sharp. I nodded. This weekend. Where? I didn't answer. She crossed her arms. We've done everything for you, Ava. Do you even realize that? We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. With my money, I said evenly. Her eyes flared. Don't speak to me like that. I took a deep breath. I'm not trying to be cruel, Mom.
But I need you to hear me. You stole from me.
That wasn't help. That wasn't love. That was a violation. She looked away, blinking fast. Jordan could have been in jail, she said finally. He was desperate. So was I. I snapped. I was desperate to change my life. To do something that didn't end in chaos. But you didn't see that, did you? You just saw money. The room went quiet. Then came the line I knew was coming. You're tearing this family apart. I almost laughed. You did that when you chose his future over mine. I walked away. That night, I didn't sleep in the garage. I drove to my friend Kyra's and crashed on her couch. She didn't ask questions. Just handed me a blanket and said, You don't owe anyone your peace. The next morning, she helped me scout short-term sublets. I found a furnished studio 2 miles from the Lumitech campus, owned by a retired professor who gave me a discount after I told her I was a student intern. Engineering girls gotta stick together, she said with a wink. I wired the deposit that afternoon. By Friday, I had keys. I returned home only once, to collect the rest of my things. Jordan was there. Of course he was. He leaned against the doorframe of the garage like he had every right to be there, arms crossed, trying to look like he still ran the show. Mom says you're overreacting, he said. I didn't respond. He stepped closer. You're really moving out over some money? I turned to face him.
No.
I'm moving out because for 22 years, I was invisible in this house. And the first time I made myself visible, you all took something from me. He shrugged. You'll be fine. You always are. That's the problem, I said quietly. You all assume I'll be fine, so you treat me like I'm disposable.
He scoffed.
Drama queen. I walked past him without another word, and I didn't look back. The apartment smelled like old books and lavender. There was a scuff on the baseboard, the radiator made a polite hissing sound, and the desk wobbled just slightly when I leaned on it. And I loved it. All 400 square feet of it. It was mine. I'd moved in the day before orientation at Lumitech. A 1-bedroom sublet with uneven floors, thin walls, and a second-hand twin bed that groaned if I breathed too hard. But it had a lock I controlled. A window that overlooked real trees instead of cracked pavement. A desk where no one would throw their bills or sit uninvited. That first night, I curled up under a thrifted blanket and cried so hard I gave myself a headache, not from sadness, but from the release. This was what I'd been clawing toward for years. And now that I had it, I didn't quite know what to do with the silence. The next morning, I walked into Lumitech's innovation building wearing the only button-up shirt I owned and carrying a bag packed with a laptop, 3 pens, and 6 backup chargers, just in case. Imposter syndrome hit before I crossed the threshold. Everyone looked like they belonged. Polished, confident, sipping expensive coffee from branded thermoses. The girl ahead of me had pink hair and a rolling monitor case. The guy behind me wore a suit jacket over a Legend of Zelda hoodie. And then there was me, the kid from a converted garage with a duct-taped laptop and the weight of a drained bank account on her shoulders. I almost turned around, but then I heard Dr. Lin's voice in my head. You're not just good. You're dangerous when someone gets in your way. I adjusted my grip on the bag and walked in. Orientation was a blur of tech demos, safety protocols, and project previews. They broke us into teams of 5 and assigned us to individual mentors. My team lead was a woman named Samira, early 30s, sharp bob, sharper tone, with the kind of competence that made everyone shut up when she walked in. She glanced at my file and raised an eyebrow. No degree yet? I braced for judgment. She nodded once. Doesn't matter. You're here. Those 3 words, you're here, hit me harder than they should have. By the end of the first day, I had a security badge, 3 whiteboards of notes, and the beginnings of a 3D mapping algorithm sketched in the margins of my notebook. It felt like breathing again after being underwater for too long. That night, I made pasta with frozen vegetables in my tiny kitchenette and ate sitting cross-legged on the floor, my laptop propped on a milk crate. I opened a spreadsheet and titled it, Project Rebuild Ava. Column 1, Expenses. Column 2, Income. Column 3, Goals. The list was modest. Pay off moving debt. Build an emergency fund. Replace my old laptop. Apply for external scholarships. But at the bottom, I wrote something in bold. Buy my freedom twice. Once for revenge. Once for peace. 3 days into the internship, Samira called me into her office. Close the door, she said. My stomach flipped. Relax, she added, reading my face. You're not in trouble. I sat. She folded her hands on the desk. We had a few of the senior engineers reviewing your onboarding materials. Someone flagged your name. I froze. Was something wrong? She leaned back.
No.
Something interesting. Dr. Lin submitted a private letter of recommendation. That made me blink. I hadn't known she sent anything beyond my resume. It was intense, Samira continued. Said you were the most promising field mind she taught in 10 years. That you knew how to think beyond what the manual says. That you were the kind of person who builds when everyone else freezes. My throat tightened. She also said, and I quote, give Ava a problem she shouldn't be able to solve, and she'll find a way anyway. Not because she's reckless, but because she refuses to let limitations define her. I didn't know what to say. She was right, Samira added. You don't talk much, but I've already seen you reframe 2 problems the rest of your team couldn't untangle in hours. I just see patterns, I murmured. Then keep seeing them. We need more people like you. She slid a folder across the desk. We're putting together an internal pitch competition for a government contract. You're not technically eligible yet, but if you want to sit in on the brainstorms, I'll approve it. I blinked at her. You'd let me contribute? You already are, she said. I just want the rest of the room to notice. That night, I let myself celebrate. I bought a $10 lemon cake from the bodega downstairs and lit a single candle. 1 week ago, I was sobbing into a pillow, wondering if I'd ever trust myself again.
Now
I was designing motion systems that might end up in real-world devices. Real prototypes. Real clients. I was finally becoming the version of Ava I always knew I could be before the bank account drained, before the guilt trips, before my name was synonymous with backup plan. I was still angry, still hurt, but I was building. And that mattered more. Then came the message. It was past midnight when I saw the name flash on my screen, Jordan. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Mom told me you moved out.
said you got some fancy job.
Must be nice not having to deal with this mess anymore. I just got served. I guess the debt wasn't fully covered. You happy now? I felt my stomach twist. Not from guilt, he'd made his bed. But from the nerve. He hadn't said a word when I was drowning. Not when I cried. Not when I left. Not when I called him out. And now he wanted sympathy? I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off my phone and walked out onto the tiny fire escape. The city glowed around me, alive and indifferent. And for once, that indifference felt like safety. No one here expected me to solve their problems. No one was watching to see if I'd fold. I looked up at the stars, invisible behind light pollution, and whispered, I don't know how to be free yet, but I'm learning. And I was. Day by day. Bit by bit. Bite by bite. Week 4 at Lumitech started like any other, coding bugs, coffee refills, and quiet victories. I had found my rhythm. My team had started coming to me with troubleshooting questions. My solution for the low-voltage misfire in our prototype arm had made its way into a permanent update. Even Samira, who once looked through me like I was a ghost, now greeted me with a nod and you got 5 minutes? Every day, I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The lab was cool and quiet in the evenings, the hum of machines familiar and soothing. I'd sit cross-legged on the floor with my laptop, refining interface sequences while security guards did their rounds and the vending machine blinked tired encouragement in the corner. This was the life I had earned. Not given. Not inherited. Earned. And then my mother emailed me. Subject line: dinner next weekend? I almost deleted it without reading. But the body of the email stopped me cold. Your father and I have been talking. We want to make things right. We know you've been doing well. Jordan mentioned you're working for some company now. That's great. We're proud. Could we all meet for dinner next Saturday? Just talk. There were 3 sentences in that email that made my jaw clench. We're proud. Jordan mentioned. And worst of all, we want to make things right. No apology. No accountability. Just vague compliments and a dinner invitation served cold. I closed the laptop and pushed it away, heart pounding. I hadn't realized how little I missed them until they reached out again. And yet, some part of me still burned with the old need to be heard, to be seen, to be understood by the people who raised me. I opened the email again. Then I opened a blank document and started writing a reply. The next morning, I found an envelope on my doorstep. No stamp. No sender. Just my name in familiar handwriting I hadn't seen in months. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. 3 pages long. From my dad. I hadn't spoken to him since I moved out. When the whole bank account fallout happened, he'd been the enforcer, cold, dismissive, and full of family-first speeches that ignored everything I was going through. But this letter, it was different. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, it began. I won't pretend I understood your reaction at first. I thought you were being dramatic, ungrateful. But then I saw how fast you disappeared, how quiet it got. And I started thinking, maybe you didn't leave because you were angry. Maybe you left because you were never allowed to be anything else. I sat down slowly, stunned. We messed up, Ava. And not just with the money. With you. You were easy to ignore because you never caused problems. You cleaned up after your brother, you took care of yourself, and you never asked for more than you were given. We thought that meant you were fine. We were wrong. By the end of the letter, I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase what they'd done. But it was the first time he'd spoken to me as if I were an equal. A person. Not just the quiet daughter who handled everything while they handed everything to someone else. And then, attached to the last page, was something that shattered me more than the letter itself. A cashier's check. $42,738.26. Exactly what had been drained from my account. There was a sticky note attached, written in my mother's handwriting. We sold the SUV. Jordan's been working part-time. It's not everything, but it's something. You deserve that much. I sat for a long time with that check in my hand, unable to feel anything. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that they had acknowledged the cost, finally. And now I didn't know what to do. At Lumitech, things only got more intense. The internal pitch Samira had invited me to shadow, it turned into something bigger. Way bigger. She pulled me aside before the second round of team reviews and said, "We're officially greenlit to prototype. I want you on the build team." I blinked. Seriously? Seriously. You've earned your way in. She paused. But just so you're clear, this won't be easy.
Long hours, high stakes.
And if the client likes what they see, we're on a fast track to production. My heart was racing. Are you in? She asked. I was still holding the check in my bag. The weight of it was somehow heavier than the opportunity in front of me. I'm in, I said. That night, I stared at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror of my apartment. I'd always thought justice would feel louder. But this was quiet. Strange. Almost lonely. They paid me back. Not with words. With action. And for the first time, I didn't feel victorious. I felt torn. Because a part of me still wanted to hand the money back and say, too late. But another part whispered, you fought for this. Don't punish yourself because they finally listened. I decided to cash the check. Not out of forgiveness, but because I was going to turn every penny into something bigger than what they took. I emailed my parents that night. Thank you for the letter and the restitution. I appreciate the effort. I'm not ready for dinner, but I'm willing to keep the door open.
On my timeline.
And with my boundaries respected. I signed it.
Ava.
No love, Ava. Not yet. 2 days later, Samira called another team meeting. Lumateca's client wants to visit, she said. They'll be here in person next week. We'll need to present. My stomach flipped. Samira locked eyes with me. Ava, I want you to co-lead the demo. I blinked. Me? You've been doing the real work behind the scenes. It's time they saw the person holding it together. I nodded slowly. I'll be ready. And I meant it. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding my family together. I was holding myself together. And that was enough. The morning of the client demo, I woke before my alarm. 5:41 a.m. I laid there in the dark for a moment, the ceiling of my little studio barely visible in the blue light seeping through the blinds. For once, the usual knot of anxiety wasn't there. It had been replaced with something else, something steadier. I felt ready. After weeks of late nights, problem-solving marathons, and quiet corrections when others gave the wrong numbers, the moment had come. I wasn't just contributing, I was leading. Co-presenting a fully functioning prototype for a defense contract review team. 22-year-old Ava from the converted garage bedroom was about to show government officials a machine she helped build from scratch. I got up, made coffee, ironed my one professional outfit for the third time, and walked the 3 blocks to Lumatech in sneakers, dress shoes in my tote bag. Samira met me in the conference prep room, already reviewing the demo checklist. You good? She asked without looking up. Better than good, I said, surprised by the truth in my own voice. She nodded. Let's keep it that way. The presentation room was sleek and bright. White walls, a glass table, 2 wheeled monitors, and the robot prototype centered on a mobile platform. We'd programmed the arm to do a live response task, tracking hand gestures in real time and reacting with precision. My heart thudded as the clients arrived, 3 stern men in suits, 1 woman with a kind of deadpan expression that made me sit up straighter just to earn a reaction. Samira opened the meeting. She spoke smoothly, confidently, like someone born to stand in front of million-dollar decisions. Then she turned to me. Ava Patel will walk you through our design logic and performance parameters, she said. I stepped forward. No shaking hands. No wavering voice. I was clear. Technical.
Poised.
I guided them through every stage of the prototype, from voltage regulation to adaptive learning feedback. When the robotic arm replicated the client's hand gestures in perfect sync, the woman in the back actually smiled. We nailed it. Afterward, the client team left, nodding and murmuring. Samira turned to me and said only 2 words. Nice work. I beamed. We had done it. The buzz carried me through the rest of the day. Coworkers I barely knew gave me quiet nods. A junior engineer named Jay fist bumped me near the vending machine. Samira stopped by my desk with 2 chai lattes and just said, pick one. We're celebrating. I stayed late that night, riding the high. Just before 8 p.m., I packed up and walked out to the front entrance. That's when I saw them, standing beside the metal bike rack like they belonged there. My parents. Both of them. My mother was in a pastel cardigan, clutching a reusable grocery bag like it would make this casual. My father had a folder in one hand and the same tight smile he wore at church. I froze. They smiled.
Waved.
Like this was normal. Like they hadn't driven 90 minutes uninvited to a place I'd built my life around without them. I stepped closer, pulse hammering. "What are you doing here?" I asked flatly. "We just wanted to see you," my mom said, eyes shining. "We heard today was a big deal." I blinked. "You showed up to my workplace." Without asking. Dad held up the folder. "We wanted to bring you these. Your old certificates, letters of recommendation from high school. Thought you might want them for your records now that things are going well." He meant it as a compliment. But all I heard was, "Now that you're finally worth noticing." I looked between them. "Who told you about the demo?" They exchanged a glance. "Jordan," my mom admitted. "Of course. And you thought showing up here would be helpful?" My dad frowned. "We're supporting you." "No," I said, voice rising. "You don't get to redefine that word. You don't show up after ignoring me for months, after taking what was mine, and call it support. You don't crash this." Mom's eyes welled up. "Ava."
No.
The words came sharper now. "You didn't come to support me. You came to be seen supporting me. You want credit for a success you never believed in." Dad's face hardened. "That's not fair." Neither was taking my savings. Neither was calling me ungrateful when I left. And neither is hijacking the one thing I've built that didn't involve you. People were starting to glance over now. A few coworkers exiting the building slowed down to look. But I didn't care. I was done protecting their image at the cost of my reality. Mom reached into her bag. "We made a reservation. Just the three of us. To celebrate." I stepped back. "I'm not coming with you." "Ava," Dad warned. "Don't be dramatic." "You think this is dramatic?" I asked, my voice trembling now.
No.
Dramatic was draining my future to fix your golden child's mistakes. Dramatic was waiting for you to see me as more than backup. Dramatic was hoping you'd change.
This?
This is called having boundaries. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. Dad opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "I have to get up early tomorrow. And I've already celebrated with people who actually see me." I turned and walked away. They didn't follow. That night, I sat on my fire escape again. No crying this time. No guilt. Just silence and the soft glow of streetlights below. I had said what needed to be said. And I hadn't backed down. The next morning, a small envelope sat outside my apartment door. Inside was the folder Dad had tried to hand me, along with a note. "We were wrong. We don't know how to fix it. But we won't show up uninvited again. Mom and Dad." No excuses. No spin. Just quiet acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. And for now, that was enough. 3 weeks after the client demo, I was handed the kind of assignment that makes or breaks people. Samira called me into her office and closed the door, a signal I was starting to recognize meant this is serious. "We're expanding the prototype," she said. "Client wants a secondary function, object recognition, and adaptive grip response." I nodded. "Makes sense. They need the unit to adjust for fragile payloads." Samira smiled faintly.
Exactly.
"And they want the first draft in 2 weeks." My pulse quickened. "What's the team size?" "You." I blinked. "Just me?" "You've proven you can handle more than your title implies. This is an opportunity to own something front to back. But it's not going to be easy." My mind raced: hardware adjustments, sensor recalibration, machine learning mapping. I felt the fear creeping in, but I nodded anyway. "I want it." "Good," she said. "Because I already told the client it's yours." The next 2 weeks became a blur. 12-hour days. Weekend sessions. Diagrams scribbled on my apartment wall. Half-eaten sandwiches and caffeinated survival. It wasn't just about impressing the client. It was about proving something to myself. That I could do this on my own. That I didn't need a safety net. That the girl whose family once called her too sensitive for walking away could now stand alone in a high-stakes environment and deliver. I stopped answering calls. I missed texts from Kyra, from Dr. Lin. Even Samira started checking in more often. You're doing great, Ava, but don't forget to breathe. I'm fine, I always said, with a too tight smile. But I wasn't fine. I was wired. I dreamed in code. Ate standing up. Cried once, quietly, in the supply closet, when I fried a board and lost 3 hours of work. Still, I kept pushing. Because I was terrified that if I didn't push, everything I'd rebuilt would fall apart. Then one night, 3 days before my final review, I made a mistake. I'd been working late, trying to calibrate the pressure sensors. The prototype kept overclenching, squashing test objects instead of gently cradling them. I'd written new code, but the results were inconsistent. I was tired, angry at myself. I pulled an old script from a private online robotics forum, something I'd bookmarked months ago. I didn't copy it outright, but I used parts of the logic structure. Reworded, adapted. I told myself it was fine. It was inspired, not stolen. I saved the file under a new name and moved on. The next morning, I couldn't shake the guilt. That line I always swore I'd never cross? Had I just stepped over it? At the review meeting, the prototype performed flawlessly. The pressure recognition adjusted mid-grip. The object sensors responded dynamically to glass, rubber, plastic. The client clapped at the end of the demo. Samira looked at me with pride I hadn't seen before. You just changed your own ceiling, she said afterward. We're expanding your contract. Full-time offers coming next week. I nodded numbly, because all I could hear was the internal voice whispering, you didn't really build it all yourself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the code, scanned line by line. Yes, I had made changes, but the backbone was still borrowed. Not unethical by legal standards, maybe, but enough to chip at my integrity. I closed the file and stared at the screen. What would I have done a year ago? I already knew the answer. The next morning, I walked into Samira's office and shut the door behind me. I need to tell you something, I said. Her expression shifted immediately. What is it? I explained everything. How I'd used logic from an old public forum script. How I adapted it, didn't copy it directly, but still felt like I blurred a line. How I wasn't reporting it because someone else caught me because no one had, I was reporting it because it mattered to me. When I finished, there was a long silence. Samira leaned back slowly in her chair. You know you didn't technically violate anything, she said. It was public, it was modified, and you cited no ownership conflict. I know, I replied, but I need my name to mean something. And if I move forward with this job, I need to know I earned it on clean terms. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Thank you for telling me. She tapped her desk. We'll annotate the code for transparency. And you'll rebuild that section from scratch next week. Consider it part of onboarding. I exhaled. A quiet relief. Not punishment. Accountability.
Growth.
Later that evening, I finally replied to Dr. Lin's text from earlier in the week.
Hey.
I almost forgot who I was this week, but I found her again. Thanks for giving me the tools to remember. Her reply came almost immediately. Integrity doesn't live in perfection, Ava. It lives in what you do when no one's watching. That weekend, I left my laptop at work and took the train to a nearby coastal town.
No notifications. No blinking screens.
Just wind. Just sky. Just Ava. For the first time in months, I read a book that had nothing to do with algorithms. I let myself sleep past 9. I wrote a list, not of tasks but of values. My real code. I will not earn respect by bleeding for it. I will not mistake overwork for purpose. I will protect my peace more than my pride. I will build honestly. I will walk away again if I have to. And I will never, ever shrink myself to be more acceptable. Because this new life? It wasn't just a rebellion. It was home. The invitation came on a Tuesday. A cream-colored envelope tucked into my mailbox, addressed in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a formal card, Jordan's engagement announcement. He was getting married in 3 weeks. The ceremony would be held at the Botanical Gardens just outside town. There was a handwritten note on the back. We know it's been a hard year, but we'd love for you to be there. Your family. Maybe this could be a fresh start.
Mom. I stared at it for a long time.
Not out of sentiment, out of disbelief. A year ago, they drained my future to clean up Jordan's mess. Now, he was getting married in an upscale venue, probably with a registry full of high-end nonsense, and I was supposed to show up and smile? I thought about throwing the invitation away, but something stopped me. Not curiosity, not forgiveness, just completeness. This wasn't a family reunion. It was a graduation.
Mine.
So I RSVP'd with one line. I'll come, but I'm not pretending. The day of the wedding was warm and golden. Late summer. The kind of day where nothing wants to go wrong. I wore a navy blue dress I'd thrifted and hemmed myself. Simple, sharp, honest. I arrived alone. No plus one. No armor. The gardens were filled with strangers and soft music and awkward cousins I hadn't seen since I was 15. People whispered when I walked by. I ignored them. I spotted my mother near the ceremony arch, directing florists with an anxious smile. She turned and froze when she saw me. Then she came over. "Ava," she breathed. You look good." "Thanks," I said. "So do you." She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something more, but couldn't find the words. I waited. Nothing came. So I walked past her, toward the seating area, and took a spot near the edge. Alone, but grounded. The ceremony itself was a blur. Jordan stood at the altar looking smug and polished, his bride radiant and unfamiliar. I wondered if she knew what kind of family she was marrying into. Then again, maybe she'd change him. Maybe not. Halfway through the reception, Jordan finally approached. He had 2 drinks in his hands, offered me one. I shook my head. "Didn't think you'd show," he said. I looked him square in the eye. "Did you want me to?" He shrugged. "Mom did." I smiled. Not out of joy. Just acknowledgement. He shifted his weight. "Listen, I know things got messy." "Messy?" I repeated, like the word had a bitter aftertaste. "Look," he said, "I didn't ask them to take your money. That wasn't my idea." "But you didn't stop them." He didn't respond. "You let them hand you what I earned," I continued, "and you spent it. And then you acted like I was the problem for being angry."
He sighed.
"I was screwed, Ava. I was scared. So was I." We stood there in silence for a long beat. Finally, he said, "I guess I should say thank you. If they hadn't used your money, I don't know what would have happened to me." I stared at him. "You know what would have helped more than a thank you, Jordan?"
Growth.
He looked away. "Do you ever think about what it cost me?" I asked. "No," he admitted. "I didn't. I do now." I nodded. "Then do better. Not for me. For her," I said, glancing at his new wife across the tent. He looked over too. "She keeps me accountable."
Good, I said.
"Then maybe you'll be the first man in this family who breaks the pattern." I turned to leave. "Ava," he called after me. I paused. "I really am sorry." I didn't turn around. "Then don't make your apology my responsibility," I said. "Just live it." Later, while I sipped club soda at the edge of the dance floor, my mother approached again. Alone this time. No performance. "I know you didn't come here for us," she said quietly. "But thank you for showing up." I met her eyes. "I didn't come to support Jordan." She nodded. "I came because I wanted to see who I was now," I said. "And I needed to know if I could stand here, surrounded by all this history, and still feel whole." "And?" she asked. I smiled, slow and certain. "I do." She exhaled. "I never knew how much I'd regret the things we did."
I believe that, I said.
"I don't expect you to forgive us." "Good," I said. "Because forgiveness isn't a transaction. It's a boundary I haven't crossed yet. And I may never. But that's not cruelty. That's just consequence." She nodded, teary-eyed. "You always were stronger than we gave you credit for," she whispered. "No," I corrected. "I was always strong. You just didn't look closely enough." I didn't stay long after that. I left before the cake was cut. Slipped out quietly, no drama. No speeches. No cinematic exits. Just me. And a clear sky. As I walked to the car, I opened my phone and texted Samira. Pitch idea brewing. Let's talk Monday. Then I texted Kyra. You were right. I didn't need closure. But I got clarity. That's more than enough. She replied with a single heart emoji. That night, back in my apartment, I stood at my window and looked out at the city. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because they made it right, but because I made it mine. My peace. My path. My power. The email came on a Wednesday afternoon, buried between a lunch reminder and a Slack thread about office chair replacements. Subject: Lumatech Women in Leadership Nominee Submission. I almost didn't open it, but when I did, my breath caught in my throat. You've been nominated for our Rising Innovators Spotlight Series. The board would like you to speak at next month's Women in Leadership event.
Me.
The girl who used to whisper her ideas in the back row. The girl whose family used her as a safety net until she snapped. The girl who once thought being quiet meant being invisible, and being useful meant being expendable. They wanted me to speak. Samira confirmed it with a grin as she passed my desk. You deserve it, she said. You've been building more than machines here, Ava. You've been building trust, leadership, identity. She paused. And for what it's worth, some of us noticed long before the nomination came in. That night, I stood in my apartment, staring at the small framed sticky note I kept pinned above my desk. The one I'd written almost a year ago. Project: Rebuild Ava. Next to it, I had scribbled new words in permanent marker. Project: Rise. The day of the speech arrived fast. I wore a navy jumpsuit and a silver pin Dr. Lin had sent me with a note that said, "This world doesn't just need you to survive. It needs you to lead." I stepped onto the stage with trembling fingers and a steady heart. The audience quieted. I took a breath and spoke. My name is Ava Patel. I'm 23 years old, and I built my life with my bare hands after it was taken apart piece by people who told me I was overreacting. The silence in the room deepened. When I started in this field, I didn't have connections. I didn't have legacy or safety nets. I had code. I had curiosity. I had hunger. And eventually I had clarity. I scanned the room. Sometimes, the greatest innovation you can make isn't a product. It's a decision. To walk away from people who only show up when it benefits them. To choose your name over their narrative. To build a future that doesn't beg for permission. A few people shifted. Others sat forward. Leadership doesn't start when someone gives you a title. It starts when you reclaim your worth before anyone claps for it. I ended with the only truth that ever mattered. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep people warm. You can choose yourself and still glow. Applause followed, but I wasn't waiting for it because I already knew who I was. After the event, I stepped outside to breathe. Dr. Lin had driven in for the speech. She met me near the garden steps, arms crossed, smiling like she saw every version of me at once.
Told you, she said.
I laughed. Still think about leaving it all behind? She asked. Sometimes, I admitted. But now I know I won't run. I'll redesign. She handed me a small box. Inside was a gift, a custom nameplate for my desk. Ava Patel, lead systems developer. You're not just surviving anymore, she said. You're setting the blueprint. A month later, I launched my first mentorship program, pairing high school girls in underfunded districts with engineers in real STEM careers. I named the initiative Project Spark. The first girl I matched? Lila, age 15, building drones in her garage. When we had our first call, she asked me, "How did you know when it was your turn to lead?" I smiled. I didn't, I said. I just stopped waiting for permission. Somewhere back in my hometown, Jordan was settling into married life. My parents were quieter now. They texted sometimes, short, cautious messages that asked how I was and ended with, "We're proud of you always." And I believed they meant it, but I didn't need them to anymore. Because everything I used to wait for, from their validation to their apologies, I had already found in myself. Sometimes, when I walk through the labs at Lumatech or sit alone in my apartment after a long day, I think about the girl I used to be. Tired, undervalued, controlled.
She didn't vanish. She evolved.
She learned that quiet isn't weakness, and kindness isn't currency, and ambition isn't selfish. She learned to say no. She learned to leave. She learned to become. This is her story. My story. Not a revenge story. Not even a survival story. A blueprint. For anyone who's ever been made to feel small in their own home. For anyone who's been told to sacrifice themselves for someone else's recklessness. For anyone who's been used, then blamed for leaving. You're not wrong for walking away. You're not cruel for choosing peace. You're not broken for wanting more. You're building something. And, trust me, it's worth it. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, just know you're not alone and you're not wrong. Hit like if Ava's story hit home, and subscribe for more stories about taking your power back, one boundary at a time.